I thank everyone for letting me come tell my story. It's a different story and something different you haven't heard today. I'm basically ground zero for boots in the water over 300 days a year. So my story is how the climate change, how the world climate change impacted me. I'm from a small town, Branford, Connecticut, and it might seem like it's just a small area, but this can be extrapolated to a lot of the other guys that I know that are fishermen in other areas. I have a 42-foot lobster boat. I've done clamming, running tugboats, and I started up oystering and done some seaweed farming also, which is a new thing. This was an old picture that we had. You can notice the wooden lobster pots there. When we first started, that picture was probably in the late 70s, and we used wooden lobster traps, and we pulled the lobsters, and there was quite a few lobsters to catch back then. And cliche here, this is again when pots were wood and men were steel. That's a picture of me, probably 16. I am no longer a man of steel, as my chiropractor will tell you. Many, many long days on the water really take a toll on your body. All right, here's a picture of lobstering at its peak. In 1998, in a small area around Branford, there were 24 full-time lobstermen fishing 27,000 lobster traps. Today, there's 3 part-time lobstermen. And in this rare scene photo, we had 17 totes of lobsters, over 1,500 pounds for our day's catch. It's pretty much filled the back of a pickup truck. And one thing to be aware of is and in those days, we didn't tell our competitors what we caught, and that's why I say this picture really hasn't ever been seen in public, because you wouldn't want to have other people setting in your pockets, and we didn't tell the management what we did either, because we wouldn't want them to possibly know what we were doing. Okay, but then in 1998, we had a Hurricane Floyd, and they were at the time they were spraying for the West Nile virus, and they sprayed the malathion and permethrin. And the thing that people don't realize is that when lobsters are in the water column, when they're small, they're very similar to a mosquito, and you see jumping around a little bucket of water. So when they did go spraying for these lobsters to kill the mosquitoes, they also killed all the lobsters. And it was also, that was 1998, as the senator said, was a big El Nino year, and it's similar to this year, and we had record warm water, so pretty much the lobsters died like it was a house of cards. It was not just one thing, it was a combination of 2 factors. So after that, we were, after die-off, the pots were coming up empty. Lobsters would become an endangered species. We kind of joked that there's a museum, Peabody Museum, that maybe I'll be in there someday as a endangered lobster man. Okay, so then it all came back around. With no lobsters to catch, we looked for other ways to make a living on the water. Some began conching or winkling. These are able to withstand the warmer waters. And without the lobsters, they were able to fill the niche that the lobsters left open for them. When they're small, we assume, we're not sure, but when they're tiny, the lobsters punch them up in their claws and eat them. So they began to flourish. The almighty conch, I don't know if some of you have younger kids and have ever heard of SpongeBob and the magic conch, but this was my magic conch. The conch wink was saved the local fishing industry. Very little was known about the animal. Tolerant to temperatures. They live out of water for up to a month. They live in stagnant water for 6 months. And it's a voracious predator, too. With the disappearance of the lobsters, the lobsters was always the reigning king in the area. And with the disappearance, it left, like I said, a niche for them. And a nice thing about the conch, it wasn't tied to the local economy. Lobstering we always got the lowest prices for lobsters around Thanksgiving. The conch, at the time, was used for squinjili salad. I don't know if everyone's ever eaten squinjili salad, but there was just a small market for that. And now they've learned to like them over in China, which is good for us. And the high foreign demand allowed the price to skyrocket. So we had to diversify or bust, and that was the motto at the time. And you can see this picture on the boat. We have just about everything on there. We got gill nets, we got wire pots, we got wooden pots. So this was the new age of fishing now. The guys that didn't diversify, there was a handful of those lobstermen, or actually just about all lobstermen, were no longer with us. So they moved on to other jobs and doing other things. So we began growing oysters was another thing. Those are upweller docks, which can be used for multiple purposes. That one there we tie our boats up to, but also is used for raising the tiny oysters that we get that are started about the size of a grain of sand. And there's some oysters, farm-raised select oysters. And here's a multiple-use lobster pot. The lobster pots became worthless, so I had my permit, was good for 3,000 lobster pots that I had stacked up in the yard with nothing to do with them. So we had to find other ways to use the lobster pots. And there's also on this pot is some of the red seaweed, which has recently become a problem. And we think that it was brought over by a tanker or clinging to some of the oysters from the Far East. We also began doing scallops. So like I said, we really diversified into other things. Here's a bag of on the top of the lobster pots. Here's a converted lobster trap to a scallop cage, which was another way we tried to make use of these lobster pots. And you can see in the back there's just a small sample of the pile of lobster pots that we had. Here's a 3-tier condo cage used for scallops. We found out though that it's a trade-off between the density of the scallops and the room that you have to put the scallops. So we did find that the scallops are very tolerant to these are bay scallops, not the offshore scallops. They're tolerant to the warm water, but they have trouble wintering over in the cold water. And here's a farm-raised scallop. And this one was able to survive the winter. Okay, last year, unlike this year, it was the coldest water temperatures ever recorded. Some of the scientists that helped me out, they have temperature gauges, and the water temperature remained at 29 degrees Fahrenheit for 12 days, and saltwater freezes just about frozen water. And under 30 degrees Fahrenheit for 45 days. And ice was a big issue. And here's some ice around the oyster cages. And one interesting fact about this was the way that oysters were able to survive in the ice. And what happens is the ice actually forms around the bags and the cages, and it creates its own insulating factor. And these oysters last year that were encased in solid blocks of ice were alive. when they were thawed out, in the spring. And oysters are very tolerant to the wild weather fluctuations that we experience today. And here's one of my beds, my wild oyster beds. It's on one of the local sandbars. You can see how they're flourishing and sticking up all over the place. And this is the same bed after, I think it was the hurricane or superstorm Sandy. The destruction of the oysters and the cages can get ruined too. And the storms, from what I've experienced, have become less frequent but more violent. The energy, I always say everything evens out, and the energy gets built up in the water like it gets built up in the water, and it gets released like a coiled spring. And you can see in that picture, the oysters have all been silted over. You can't see any at all anymore. All right, so then one of the other things we started doing is people probably have kelp chips. This is Dr. Jang and Charlie Yarish of Yukon were both pioneers of this process of deploying the kelp out on long lines. And you can see the kelp is seated on a PVC pipe, and then a rope is slid through the pipe and goes around the main line like a curlicue, and that's the seed, and then it grows from there. And this is what it grows into after, I think that was in May, that the kelp gets to be like that after starting. And one good thing about the kelp is that it takes a lot of nitrogen out of the water, so it's very economically friendly. Another seaweed is Gracilaria. It's just a different type of seaweed, which we've also tried growing. It's a little more difficult to grow, but it grows in the warmer summer months. Here's a line that was, Gracilaria line that was out there too long. It's just all fouled and it's unhealthy. One of the other things we started doing is, when we had been delating the fish, with the warmer water, menhaden sharks began showing up. This summer we had an 8-foot tiger shark with 4-inch teeth that started eating the seasoned deckhand. We have large, giant gator bluefish, sea trout, codfish. Following this migration of fish was the largest seal population. But the funny thing about the seals is they love stealing your fish. They swim on either side. They only eat the tails. And they swim on either side of the fish and they never get stuck in it. And they come up and they look at you and they're smiling and laughing. It's unbelievable. Okay, so the future here is uncertain. Due to climate change, the lobsters may never flourish again on Long Island Sound. Therefore, it is pursue other options. Sea farming, conching, fin fishing will be our ticket to success. Thank you.